Possibility that we started late. Unfortunately, I don't control everything. I control very little, actually. But so I do appreciate it. We will finish by 12:30. I committed a shorter one, so we have to. I'm going to speak fast. Yes, I will. And please open to page 406. In this week's portion, we read what is known as the Ten Commandments. It's actually the 10 sayings.
Thank you for sponsors. Oh, sponsors. Oh, right.
For those who like working with the concept that there are 613 mitzvot, you have to remember that.
Sponsorship.
So first of all, I would like to thank the sponsors. We have world travelers here with us,
It's our pride.
and the Fran and David are sponsoring. So first of all, their granddaughter.
They're guests. They're not members.
They are members of Klal Yisrael because they are connected to the people of Israel. So first of all, we thank you for the sponsorship, and it's wonderful. You're having a lot of nachas from your granddaughter who served her country, and she really completed it. Doing all kind of things that if they would tell us, they would have to kill us. I understand. She did some wonderful things. So and then you have a grandson who is starting. So
It started about 2 months ago.
2 months ago. Okay, so Tehillim switched from the granddaughter to the grandson. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should protect him and all the soldiers of Israel who are doing a wonderful job. And we do thank you. And we're happy to see you. Actually, we're happy to see Fran and even David. Right. So we thank you and we welcome you for the few weeks you are here. 613 commandments. You're familiar with them? It's a term that appears in the Talmud. There are 613 commandments. Unfortunately, the Talmud does not spell out which ones are the 613. So that for the past 1,500 years, we've been fighting on trying to figure out which ones are counted, which ones are not counted. What's interesting is that in the 10 commandments, there are many more than 10 commandments. There are many, many more. Even the first commandment, there's a question if it's technically a commandment or God just saying, hey, I'm here, and therefore follow my commandments. So we're not going to call it the 10 commandments, we're going to call it the 10 sayings. These are 10 statements that eventually they are etched into stone, and it becomes a document that symbolizes the relationship we have with the Almighty. And just as a marriage, we have a ketubah, and the ketubah is a document that binds the two parties together. We had our ketubah. When things went wrong, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He breaks it. Okay, that's the document that we are going to read. But the people of Israel did not receive that document. What we are reading now is the nation of Israel experiencing some kind of revelation. They hear something. Moshe Rabbeinu breaks it down for them. So the words themselves, they most probably did not hear everything from God in a way that they could comprehend. Perhaps they've heard the first two and understood them. But Moshe Rabbeinu is really the one that breaks it down. But what you have to be mindful of is that there are 10. We're going to go through them. But I'm going to have a specific question as it relates to number 2. So here we go. Number 1 is, the first of the 10 commandments appears on page 406, which is the beginning of chapter 20, where the Almighty says you should know, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am your God. Now, we could talk about the awesomeness of God, the creation, the beauty in nature, the brilliance in nature, the species, those of you who travel the world, there are things that amaze you. And you can be amazed by just walking through the fruit and vegetable aisle in a supermarket. There's some amazing things that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going so big. He's making this very personal. He's not getting up there and saying, listen, I am God, I happen to create everything. Nope. He goes personal with them. This is a nation that remembers that only a few weeks earlier they are enslaved in Egypt. Now they are free. So Almighty says, listen, I am the one. Asher Hot says, Sicha Meretz Mitzrayim, I took you out of Egypt. So remember, I did something for you. We have a relationship here. And therefore, be mindful of what you are going to be hearing from me. And comes statement number 2. So on page 408 is actually the beginning. In verse 3 is the beginning of the second commandment. The second commandment is, Lo yeh lecha, you shall not have, Elohim acharim. Elohim, other gods. Now this is difficult. God saying that there are other gods, meaning those other ones that work with me, there are no other gods. So some say Elohim, that acharim, that there are others who make them into gods. or gods who are like others, meaning these are not gods that actually have a relationship. So there are different explanations as what this acherim refers to. But if God doesn't want us to worship any other entity, any other force, any other concept, he could just say so. Lo yelecha Elohim acherim. But the verse ends, and this is the end of the second. This is the end of this statement. Al panai. Al panai. Now it's not the end of the second commandment; it continues. But the words al panai literally means in my presence. Is there anywhere that God is not present in Jewish faith? No. So why does God have to say that? In other words, He is present. Obviously, we know this part, one of the basic concepts of Judaism, that there is a God, all-powerful, all-present. Why does God have to present it in a way that you shall not be recognizing other forces and other gods in my present? Why would... It's not necessary. The words are not necessary. So that's what we're going to try to understand today, and I'll give you two explanations. Explanation number one. Commentators note that it is possible for a person who believes in the God, all-powerful, almighty God, to nevertheless still retain some kind of relationship with a pagan God. Now, the commentator Seforna, early 16th century, notes the following, that the 10 northern tribes were exiled from the land of Israel by King Sancherib. King Sancherib had a unique operating system where what he would do is he would uproot a nation, place them in some foreign territory, and then bring another nation and place them in the territory that was just empty. The people would have perhaps less of a link to their land, which would prevent a rebellion. And this was the system he moved, of moving nations from place to place. In the northern Israel, in the area of the Shomron, Samaria, there was a group of people who come from a land called Kutha. The Kuthians. The Kuthians land up there. The Kuthians land in the land of Israel, and they are there. But they have a crisis. They have a problem. They are attacked by wild beasts, specifically lions. Lions, thank God, with all the tsaras that do exist. Lions are not one of the ones that exist now in Eretz Yisrael, in general. But they had an issue with lions. So a pagan culture, dealing with lions, what do? You don't put up a fence, right? You don't try to figure out the science of how to prevent them from entering into the cities. You turn to the gods, right? It must be the gods. But they understood very well that if it is occurring here, we must find out about the gods who work with this land, the local gods. How do you appease the local gods? How do you deal with the local gods, the gods of Israel? So they hire some Kohanim, right? If the money's right, they would do anything probably. And the Kohanim are educating these new arrivals, these Olim Chadashim, these Kuthians, regarding Judaism, the values, the teachings, and they start practicing Judaism, right? They are careful with the chumras and shiurim, and they eat the matzah and Pesach, and they're obviously going to shake the lulav and buy the nicest esrog, right? They're going to stand along. They're going to do it because that's how you satisfy the gods of Israel, right? By having a nice yellow, perfect esrog. But the reality is that they originate and they have roots in a pagan culture, and it's very hard to just abandon, Santa Claus, things you grew up with, all the Baba. It's very, very difficult to just drop everything. So what do? You keep both, right? They were worshiping their former gods. You're not going to leave tradition. My grandmother or my grandfather worshipped that ridiculous god by doing who knows what. I'm not going to stop. But I'm in the land of Israel, and I've been taught about the God of Israel. So what's the result? They have both. They have both. Almighty God knows that it is very possible to develop a faith that is labeled shituf, that is combining the God of Israel with some other force. as those Kuthians are doing. They were doing that. They were bringing the two together. They were Jewish, acting like Jewish, but they still were sticking to their pagan practices. By the way, in rabbinic literature, that is how we label Christianity. Christianity does believe in a God of Israel, right? But they throw in something else into the mix, right? There's a Father, but there's a Son as well, the Holy Spirit. They throw something else into the mix. We label that shituf. And this is what God, the God of Israel, is telling us in this statement. Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. Meaning, I am everywhere, and it's very possible that you will indeed accept this concept of the God of Israel, but you would bring in some other God into the mix, right? Keep your options open. At times you work with the God of Israel, at times you'll feel better worshipping some pagan force. This is the statement that is telling the people of Israel not to live by such a system of values. Now, what's interesting to note, that when these Kuthians are keeping their options open, worshipping the God of Israel and pagan forces. So the verse in the book of Melachim tells us that you should know that what they were doing was actually done earlier by, believe it or not, by who? The Jews. Kemishpat hagoim asher higla. In other words, this was a Jewish problem. This absurdity was already existing among the Jews. And if you remember, Eliyahu Hanavi on Mount Carmel, when he's turning to the people of Israel and trying to guide them back to the God of Israel. So he tells them, why are you guys, in his words, posech al shnei sifim, why are you dancing at two weddings? In other words, you believe in the God of Israel. Yes, you do, but you're still worshipping these pagan gods. Make your decision already. If you believe in idolatry, so just ignore the God of Israel. If you believe in the God of Israel, you cannot go ahead and have it all. It doesn't work like that. Make your choice. So what's interesting is that this idea of the Jew, right, claiming, I'm a believer in the God of Israel, but still at the same time follow concepts, follow ideals that are destructive to Judaism, is a Jewish thing. Meaning these Kuthians, the text is not blaming them, because the text in the book of Kings is telling us they got it from the Jews. They got it from the Jews. A Meshugas. Worshipping the God of Israel, and then following pagan destructive. And again, when I say destructive, because this is not just wrong, this is corrupt. These are people that would offer their children as sacrifices, but they still believe in the God of Israel. It's interesting. Jews are often the problem for those things that people who want to harm us use. This is what we're being told. They picked it up from the Jews. There was a few weeks ago, PBS had an hour, close to 2 hours program on Bibi Netanyahu, and it was called Netanyahu's War. He's the problem. All the problems that exist in the world, you should know, according to PBS, Netanyahu's War. Now, what was it really about? What were they trying to get to? The awful relationship between Obama and Netanyahu. No, we know they have an awful relationship. Now, they made reference to the fact that when Obama is viewed by 96% of Jewish Israelis as anti-Israel, this is a terrifying, maybe it was only 94, terrifying number. I mean, these are Israelis that Bill Clinton was very popular among Israelis. Obama, 94. That means that includes all of the voters of Herzog. Right? All the voters for the left in Israel, all the voters are people that believe that Barack Obama is a person that is not concerned for the welfare of Israel. This is a terrifying statement, right? That's because the 6%, you know who they are. So they say that Obama is offended. Obama is offended. And Obama believes that, I'm really Jewish. In other words, and he said straight out that there was no U.S. president in the history, right? He's number 45. None of the first 44 were as close to Jewish people as he is. That's what he claims. Now, believe it or not, he's right. Because Who are his mentors? Well, Milevsky, the list is long. There were Jews he was associated with. But the Jews he was associated or is associated with, the Axelrod and the Emmanuel and Rami Manuel, and there are others as well, Sherman, the list of those quote-unquote Jews, these are Jews that could do the following. They could get up and say, oh, Israel is a great friend. But as a friend, we're supposed to pressure them to go ahead and give up territory. As a friend, we're supposed to pressure them to open roads and allow these Vildachayas to go ahead and shoot. That's what a friend does. A friend is supposed to be critical. Really. Right? That idea that you could go ahead and claim, I love Israel. And by the way, Canada has joined this Mishugas. Dion, what's his name? Dion? Stefan Dion. Yeah, what was his words? As friends, sometimes we have to use harsh words. Like this absurdity. Right? I could punch a guy in the face and says, I'm a friend. As friends, at times you have to knock out a few teeth. You never know, you might play hockey one day. This idea that exists, that you could present it, and this is a Jewish problem. Jews came up with it. Right? Who came up with this idea? That you could try to undermine the state of Israel, that you could have organizations that are there to go ahead and find the one case that the army did something wrong, and to make it into the Israeli army, right? Shovrim Shtika, these organizations. This is a Jewish problem. Jews are the ones that introduced the concept that you could claim that, I'm a believer in the God of Israel. I happen to do Avodah Zarah at the same time. This is what exists, and this is what is being referred to in the Al Panai. God is saying, we have a relationship. In the future, you're going to be tempted to bring other forces into the picture. Well, let me tell you, in my presence, there is nothing else. Don't go ahead and allow it takes care of your guilt conscience. You could become anti-Israel, but you could claim, I love Israel. I'm a friend, but friends are supposed to, right? It takes care of it removes those values that you were taught as a child. That, as a Jew, you're supportive of Israel. I am supportive of Israel, but I believe that as a supporter of Israel, I should be sharing with the world how destructive the Israeli army are and how cruel they are, right? And the fact is, and that their aggressiveness and the fact that they bulldozer houses. You could go to York University if you want and see a mural there of it. Anyway, this is what's being referred to. Al Panai. God is saying, don't play that game with me. You don't want to believe in me. You're not a believer. But don't claim that you are a believer, but you still worship another force. It doesn't work. In my presence, nothing else. No Elohim Acharim. That's explanation number one for this idea of Al Panai. Explanation number two. We've addressed in the fact that if you look at the 10 sayings, the first 5 correspond to the last 5. Meaning, number 2, which we are addressing, also talks about not to make images. Number 3, if you look on page 408, verse 7, it talks about not to take the name of God in vain, not to go ahead and make a false oath. Number 4 on page 410, and if you have any difficulty in remembering the numbers behind me here, the light should be on, shining on it. But number 4 is the Shabbos. Number 5 is honoring your parents. So far, so good. Right? So we have I am your God, which is a positive. Number 2 is not to go ahead and worship foreign gods. Number 3 is the oath. Number 4, Shabbos. Number 5, honoring your parents. And then we have the last 5. The last 5 usually are identified as the mitzvot that are between Adam lechavero. Right? And therefore number 6, which is the first one of the last 5, not to go ahead and kill. The next one is lo tinaf, adultery is not to be committed. Next, not to steal. Number 9 is not to bear false witness against another. And the last one is not to be jealous, not to covet your fellow's house, wife, maidservant, ox. Never been jealous of anyone's ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your fellow. Okay, so now, what does Rashi and Shir Hashirim tell us? Rashi and Shir Hashirim tells us that you should know. Number 1 corresponds to number 6. It's not just a coincidence that they place, that it looks good to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but rather 1 corresponds to 6, 2 to 7, 3 to 8, 4 to 9, and 5 to 10. How do they correspond? So here you could have a whole lecture. You could get into detail about the idea that if you do not want murder, you have to believe in a God of Israel. You have to believe in a God. Why? Because if you believe in a God, you believe that everyone's created in the image of God. And your treatment towards another human being is going to be on a different level. We have these delicate issues that we are addressing here in Ontario about physician-assisted suicide, right? And it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It is dangerous. I could already see a trial within the next decade of a person who is accused of murder, but he claims that the person I killed, I read his diary, and he was very, very, very depressed, and every day he wished that his life would come to an end, so I was doing him a favor. Now, it's a defense that's not so far-fetched in how things are in the direction we're going. I'm not minimizing, by the way, the pain when these discussions are brought to the table. They're serious ones. There's no question. Pain is real. We addressed it on the class we had a few weeks ago, that it's not something that we, God forbid, ignore. But to go ahead and allow physicians, and what's going to happen when it's a child, a teenage, there are many, many questions, right, that have to be addressed. For us Jews, the conversation only could begin with an understanding that there is a God, right? And every single human being has value, is created in the image of God, and there's value in life, and there's value in every single breath. Now that you have that information, we can have a discussion. We could go ahead and debate it. That this is fundamental. That they always quote in the name of Dostoevsky, the famous Russian writer, that if there is no God, everything is permissible. Right? In other words, socially, I'm not going to go ahead and kill someone, right? And it could be that there are ethics. I could say, listen, I'm not going to do to others. If everyone in society is going to turn around and do it, you're going to quote Kant and Sartre and all the great philosophers. But the reality is that if you're on a boat and no one's going to know about it, and the person is agitating the living daylights out of you, there must be a God, right, that prevents such things. So there's a link between number 1 and number 6. Okay, you can have a lecture on that. Number 2 and number 7 are the ones that we're going to address very, very soon. But if you move forward, I want to do number 2 last, because that's going to be dealing with our question. What is the third of the 10 sayings? Not to take, not to Lo tisad Shem, a false oath. Now, the rabbis in our tradition did a very good job with having or imbuing in everyone an understanding, instilling in everyone the significance of God's name. The false oath, or even taking an oath, scared the living daylights out of anyone. Right? It is something that worked for many, many centuries. Even in the 19th century, there were rabbinic courts that when you would turn to someone and say, okay, you want to collect the $250 that is owed to you, you make an oath. The person would pull back, would be afraid of making an oath. Right? I shared here in the past the story of the wise Rabbi Yosef Chaim from Baghdad, who Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad was dealing with a stubborn merchant in the marketplace, who claimed that he didn't cheat the individual, and when it was quite clear that he did. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, this is late 19th century, calls the merchant in and says, would you take an oath? This fellow, a stubborn fellow, says, I'm going to take an oath. And he says to him, and the merchant adds, I would even take an oath on a Sefer Torah. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim says to him, you know what? You're going to take an oath on the Shnei Luchos Habris. You're going to take an oath on the tablets. Now the guy got a little bit nervous here. The rabbi, and these are Sfardim, they believe in their rabbis, and the rabbi said he's going to pull out the tablets, I'm going to have to take an oath. He gets very nervous, and the rabbi turns to his shamish, turns to his helper, and he says, go to the room next door and bring the Shnei Luchos Habris. Bring the tablets. And the merchant gets very, very nervous, and he breaks down and he says, you know what, Rabbi? I wasn't honest. I'll pay the money. He backed off. So mission accomplished. Afterwards, he was asked, how on earth were you going to get the Shnei Luchos Habris? So he says, what do you mean? In the room next door, there is a work by Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz of the early 17th century, who was known at his work was the Shnei Luchos Habris. So I told my shamish to go ahead and get the Shnei Luchos Habris, the book. It worked. Mission accomplished. So An oath terrified people. What Judaism wants is to understand the following. Just as there are demands in the synagogue, in the spiritual realm, we have a responsibility of being ethical and being good Jews in the marketplace. And there's a problem there. It's a problem that still exists. You have many, many good Jews who will be very, very cautious with the laws of Shabbat and to go ahead and be sure that their esrog is perfect. And they're going to have the nicest Hanukkah candles because it's a mitzvah. You got to be sure to do so. And they're going to have the biggest cup of Kiddush because they want to be sure that they cover their bases. In the marketplace, it's a little bit different. In the marketplace, business is business. Business is business. And you could go ahead and a little bit of dishonesty. Judaism is afraid of that. And Judaism wants you to go ahead and take those concepts that are spiritual and infuse them into the marketplace and elevate and make the marketplace ethical. You want to avoid people stealing the property of others. You want to go ahead and avoid, right? Number 8, lo tignov. You know what you do? You bring lo tisa, you bring this fear that everyone has from making or taking a false oath and bring it into the marketplace. And make the marketplace a place for God to dwell by utilizing their fear of the oath. And that's what occurred, and that really helped throughout history. We avoided lo tignov. We avoided people stealing or taking or the dishonesty in the marketplace by always having the card of lo tisa, don't take the name of God in vain. It was used. It was utilized. It brought the two together. So we have a number 8. We are able to preserve the honesty in the marketplace. We are able to have a number 8 because we have the number 3. So you see how they correspond. Number 4 and number 9. Right? Number 9 being not to bear false testimony. As Jews, we testify to the existence of God. How do we testify to the existence of God? How do you identify a Jew as a Jew that is mindful of what Judaism is about, what our mission is about, to declare to the world that there is a God? It is achieved through the Shabbat. No question. Being the Shomer Shabbos Jew. That becomes the identity of a Jew. Right? Really, and it protects the Jew. You always, the well-known statement, they think it's a rabbinic statement, but I think it's bialek, that more than the Jew kept Shabbos, the Shabbos kept the Jew. Right? It's a beautiful statement, but it is true. In other words, you talk about the families in the beginning of the 20th century that come to North America, and they simply couldn't hold a job because they would be fired if they wouldn't show up Shabbos. Now, we're not judging them, by the way, because they probably had a halachic backing because their family would starve in some cases, right, if they wouldn't work on Shabbos. But the sad result was that those that caved in, and you read stories. I remember reading about on the Lower East Side of the child of Shomer Shabbos parents and how the kid is hanging out already with other kids that abandoned their faith. And the kids in the Saturday afternoon are going to the Nickelodeon. And the kid is pressuring the parents. And you know how it is, kids. It seems to be even 100 years ago. Could drive parents up the wall, and eventually you give in, especially if it's a younger child, right? When you use all your energy on the older kids. But the younger kid, they can do whatever they want. It's very scary.
She knows it.
She knows it very well. Yes, she does. But she runs the role. We're around here. But the reality is that the sad part was that if you give in, they gave in, and if there was no Shabbos, there was nothing preserved. That's the sad reality. Testimony to the world is Shabbos. So therefore, you see a strong relationship between number 4 and number 9. No, by the way, number 5 being honoring your parents. You've got to honor your parents. And then we are told, number 10 is not to covet. What's the relationship between the two? So the two explanations given. So Miriam gave me the following explanation. Okay, this is from my wife, and then I'll give you my explanation. And don't tell anyone if you like one over the other. If you like Miriam, just hold your fire there. Miriam said the following, that our identity is based on nature and nurture. Right? Everything we are is because of the genes we get from our parents and what we are given and what environment that was given by our parents. If we learn to accept it, that what we have is because God wanted us to have these parents and to grow up in such an environment, if we accept it and we honor our parents because we're not trying to shake off and escape from that past, if we accept that what we have is what we deserve, we could deal with the world. And then when I'm going to see someone that has a much fancier car, or that has a yacht, right, or a private plane, I'm not going to be jealous. I'm not going to covet it. It's from the world that for the world that I'm supposed to be in and achieve. I don't need a private plane. Trump does. I don't. Right. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I can be satisfied, and I'm not going to covet what others have. If I honor my parents, if I accept my parents, and I honor them, and I recognize that God gave me them, the environment and the genes, so then I could go ahead and live a happy life and not covet what others have. Okay, that's one explanation. Another explanation is the idea that, we train our kids from a young age to do good things. Like Shabbos, to sit by the Shabbos a table, or perhaps to go to shul, or perhaps to make a bracha. We train them. It's interesting that the first thing you have to train your child is actually how to treat a parent. Right? At a very young age, right? You turn to a kid. Sometimes you don't slap a parent, right? Even if you're young, you don't grab from how to communicate, because a child, they start their life with communication to a parent. Now, to go ahead and train a child, respect me, it won't work. It only works if you are a person who is devoted to that child. If you are a selfish being, odds are the kids will not respect a person who is not concerned one iota about the kid, but views children as an interruption to life. Meaning, I wanted to have a good time. For some reason, I don't know how, kids show up, right? We have kids. And the kids come in, gewalt, for the next how many years? They call it the terrible twos, from age 2 to 22, right? That you have to deal. If you have that attitude that the kids are just this major pain that I'm going to have to deal with, and the kids pick up on it, there's not going to be too much honor. If the parent, on the other hand, is concerned, if the parent understands that they have a mission, that's their responsibility, or perhaps there's a love and a bond between parents and child, then there will be kabed et avich, then there will be respect. Then there will be respect to the parent. Now, with that, if a child is not going to respect the parent due to the fact that they saw a selfish parent, what's going to happen with the child? What kind of personality are we going to have here? A very selfish person. A person that is, what about me, right? I need one for me. You know that statement? You see the car? I want to get me. I want to get one for myself. The neighbor has a nicer car, right? The nicer yacht, the nicer ox, the nicer wife, the nicer house, right? It's all about me. If there is a flaw in the kabed tavicha, if there's a flaw in honoring the parent due to the fact that the parent was a selfish parent, the result is you're going to have a person that's simply unhappy with themselves because it's all about me. And the people who are always on the receiving end, people who need everything, need attention, need them, they're not going to be happy. The happy people, as we know, are the people who walk into a party or walk into a room and they see it as their mission to make others happy, because they're going to be happy because it will be very easy for them to fulfill their mission, because you can always say the right thing to someone and elevate and create a good environment. The needy person is going to be the one that's going to covet. So that's, again, the relationship between number 5 and 10. Back to the main one, which we are addressing. Number 2 and 6, which is adultery. Well, why do people, especially, 2 and 7, good. Why do men especially have affairs? All right? I mean, I'm not saying it's a problem in Toronto, but I think in North America, right, there are such illnesses that occur. And sometimes you could have even a person who is happy, satisfied, but he stumbles in a realm that's very destructive to our identity as human beings, as Jews. So there's a fix, there's a thrill, there's something exciting, right? It's exciting, right? Why did Bill Clinton do it? Right? There's a thrill there. You could do it, no one knows. First of all, a person who believes everyone thinks he's amazing, he believes he's amazing as well, and he can do whatever he wants. it's a fix. It's a thrill that you get. And the Torah tells us that's not the way to do it. You know, you have a relationship with another. You have a relationship. There's a commitment there. And yeah, you might get that thrill, but that's not what life's about that thrill. Now, by the way, idolatry is also a thrill. The God of Israel, there's consistency, what you are supposed to do. But it seems to be that a pagan force, that you go ahead, and you could sometimes watch footage of people in the 60s and the 70s who would go ahead and smoke or take these sugar cubes or who knows what they would be inhaling. And they would act and start shaking. You would get some kind of thrill from the activities. That is how I view the paganism of the past. You get a thrill for dancing around that fire and believing that by dancing in a specific way, the God of light is going to bestow upon you light, or the God of rain is going to go ahead and provide you with the rain. You get a thrill. There's a fix that you get. And therefore, in Judaism, there's always that warning. Don't worship the God of Israel together with the pagan gods. Meaning, for many people, there's an understanding that there is a God of Israel, and I want a relationship with the God of Israel. But I still want that fix, that excitement, right? That thrill. So what we are told is that just as when it comes to a relationship between a husband and wife, the relationship is a healthy relationship when there's communication, right? When it is not just a relationship that, husband gives the money, and wife takes care of some other needs, and mission accomplished. That's not a relationship. Relationship is communication, a face-to-face relationship. The way we overcome this desire for the fix is a relationship, not just by viewing someone else as an accessory or viewing someone else as a tool for what I need. Panim el panim is a relationship. We always talk about that, right? Face to face. You can't have a good conversation with someone when both parties are, going ahead and checking or deleting their emails or the latest funny picture that was posted. Face to face. And this is what the Ribono Shel Olam is saying. If number 7 corresponds to number 2, and number 7 tells us lo tinaf, adultery has no place. To have a relationship with the spouse. So therefore, Ribono Shel Olam, in number 2, when he tells us lo yeh lachach Elohim acherim, because al panai, my presence, my face, have a relationship with me. In other words, our Judaism should not just be the don'ts, right? It's an awful Judaism. When all you know is the things we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that. That's not a Judaism. A Judaism is a relationship with God, an appreciation to God, studying science and appreciating the brilliance of the Creator, a relationship with God that you could find everywhere. You can find everywhere God in nature, God in the brilliance, God in the beauty, from a cup of coffee to a glass of wine. There's an appreciation there of an Almighty. I have a relationship, a face-to-face relationship. That is what number 2 is about. And to understand the significance of a relationship and to reject the fix, HaKadosh Baruch Hu places number 2 corresponding to number 7. Because the relationship we are supposed to have with God is very similar to the relationship that is expected from the healthy marriage. That's what we have for today. Thank you so much for coming. And you should have a wonderful... And thank you again to the sponsors, and we're happy indeed to see you both.